You want to be punished? Harry inquired, having always suspected most elves were masochists. Creature deserves it! The elf gasped and slapped a hand over his mouth. Creature will sharpen all the blood traitor torturing tools, Creature said, sticking his rear end out, waiting to be punished. Harry just looked at the old elf that was practically begging to be spanked and completely forgot what he was going to say. Would you like me to go steal one of the neighborhood muggles for you, master? No, Harry answered immediately. You know what? Forget it. It doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. Creature will start cleaning the blades, chains, and tenderizing mallets. Oh, it will be ever so much fun, master. Harry watched the disturbed house elf scurry away. Considering the first creature Harry met had chosen death over serving blood traitors, Harry was once again reminded that this was a completely different dimension with a different history. There was a loud screech of metal dragging across metal from upstairs. Harry decided to go get some breakfast and begin the search for his godfather. He would put off to later the decision of ever returning to Grimmauld Place again. Harry had located his satchel, cast a cleaning charm over his robes, and focused on Diagon Alley. With a soft pop, he apparated away, reappearing in the magical alley. With practiced ease, Harry took stock of his surroundings, seeing no immediate threats. There were a few people walking around, but not an exorbitant amount. There wasn't a strong sense of impending gloom, but this wasn't the carefree relaxation that Wizarding Britain had become after the destruction of his world's Voldemort. The people Harry saw here were cautious and aware, many of them sneaking glances at him before moving along to continue their business. Unsure what to make of this, Harry ventured towards the center of the alley and spotted a diner with patio seating. It looked pretty busy, which was what Harry was looking for. He bought a copy of the Daily Prophet at the front counter and was seated outdoors with his back to a wall so he could watch the people in the alley while listening in to others' conversation. He ordered a simple breakfast platter and was keeping his eyes and ears open. Sipping on his juice, Harry opened the Daily Prophet and saw the front page. June 6, 2006 was the date, indicating he hadn't moved temporarily at all through the exit. The entire front page was devoted to England's chances in the upcoming Quidditch World Cup. There were articles on the team, the event, the competition, but not a single mention of Death Eaters or Voldemort. Harry took this as a good sign. He watched a familiar brown-haired woman walk into the apothecary across the street, unable to connect a name to her face, but pretty sure she had been a year behind him and a Hufflepuff. He continued eating and flipping through the paper when a small article caught his eye and Harry began to choke. Apparently Death Eater attacks didn't warrant the front page, or any of the first 6 pages for that matter. Careful there, buddy, a man who had been seated next to him said. He began to pat Harry on the back to keep him from choking. Thanks, Harry said, getting a hold of himself. 1 or 2 sudden realizations were understandable, but to find out Death Eater attacks didn't warrant the front page, to find out that Voldemort was still around, that the muggles in the article were Vernon and Petunia Dursley, and that the assistant director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, James Potter, had intervened, caused Harry to gasp in the middle of swallowing. Sorry, went down the wrong pipe. Breakfast can be a tricky mistress, the man said with a smile. Harry recognized the man seated next to him, despite not having seen him in over a decade. It's the forks that trip me up. I keep grabbing the wrong end. As long as you remember which hole in your face to put the food, you should be okay. The man nodded, extending his hand in greeting. Florian Fortescue, I am Harry. Aren't we all? Florian retorted before glancing at Harry's table. You want some company? Sure, Harry said, eager to get a few answers from someone he relatively trusted and was obviously willing to talk. He moved his newspaper out of the way while Florian brought his plate over with him. So what did you read that caused you to inhale your scrambled eggs? Florian asked as he took advantage of the better jams on Harry's table. He looked up and saw Harry staring at him curiously. I happened to be looking over when your eyes went wide and you began to choke. Harry nodded, though erring on the side of caution. I was surprised to read about a Death Eater attack, to be honest, really. What was so surprising about that? Well, I know I've got the accent nailed, Harry grinned. But I'm not actually from around here, and considering I remembered something about an attack many years ago, I was surprised they were still going on. Florian shook his head. They're sporadic, but they've been around for what feels like as long as I can remember. It's been years since my shop had any spell damage I needed repaired, but the threat is always there. You don't seem to let it get you down, Harry commented. I sell ice cream, Florian grinned. All I deal in are smiles. Never had the taint of the war darken your doorstep. War? What war? The Death Eaters and the Dark Lord are terrorists, thugs at best. A couple of my neighbors were killed in an attack. It wasn't some glorious battle, nor was their home part of some strategic plan. It was just an attack. Too many good people have been caught in attacks, but to call war those terrorists to a war gives them a respect they've not earned. Harry nodded. I'm sorry to hear that. About your neighbors, I mean. It's probably the fact that it's not descended into all-out war that's kept the whole thing going for so long. Florian was wiping his mouth, having finished his meal. You certainly have interesting ideas about pleasant breakfast conversation. My apologies, Harry nodded. You asked what startled me in the paper, and my mind likes to go off on tangents. No apology needed, Florian waved him off. I wasn't bothered in the slightest, but I should get back and prep my store for opening. It's been a pleasure, Harry. One last question, Harry interjected. If you don't mind humouring me, but have you by chance seen Sirius Black, the new one? Harry had tried to mask his surprise. There's more than one. Sirius Black was a young man murdered 25 years ago, Florian explained, swinging his cloak over his shoulders. But another man with that name came into my shop just about a week ago with his cousin, Aurora Tonks, Lupin. Thank you, Harry smiled. Good luck on dealing with only smiles today. Florian looked at the sky and saw the sun was shining brightly. It's going to be a hot one. I doubt I'll need luck to have a very busy and profitable day. Harry watched the pleasant man walk briskly down the alley towards the ice cream parlor and thought about his first solid lead. It appeared that as much as things change, some things like Tonks and Mooney stay the same no matter what dimension you land in. Harry left a galleon and 7 sickles to cover his breakfast and tip. He had to be careful with his money, as he didn't have much with him. All the good wizarding records for locating someone often required identification and were handled at the ministry, which was not a place Harry wanted to go if he didn't have to. Thus he began walking towards the leaky cauldron, intent on venturing out into non-magical London. Good morning, Tom, Harry greeted as he walked into the leaky cauldron. Morning, Tom nodded, looking at Harry curiously, unable to recognize him. Anything I can do for you, mister? Harry's fine, Harry said, extending his hand to shake. And I was hoping you might have a phone book and a phone I could use. If you want a room, local calls are included, but otherwise the pay phone right out front has a book, Tom said, pointing towards the street. I check every morning to make sure no one's run off with it. Thanks, Harry nodded and walked out into the Muggle side of London. He picked up the phone book and quickly flipped to the L section. Just as he'd hoped, Lupin, Remus was listed, but not at any address, Harry remembered. He picked up the phone and dialed the number, letting it ring for 20 seconds before admitting defeat that no one was answering. He walked back into the leaky cauldron. I don't suppose you know where Old Ford Road is. Runs through Bethnal Green, as I recall, Tom answered. There an apparition point there? Harry asked. Tom nodded. Sure. Probably will drop you at the tube station, but it'll get you close. Thanks. Harry nodded and walked out. He made sure he was clear of any wards on the leaky cauldron and out of view from any muggles. Focusing on Bethnal Green, Harry apparated away. He got directions from a young woman in the tube station and found himself walking down the road listed as Remus's address. Harry couldn't remember the numbers other than a 3 and a 7 were involved, so he cast the spell that would allow him to see magic. He began walking down the road directly across from a nicely wooded park when he noticed a cellar glowing with magic. Harry was going to investigate and see if this was the place when he spotted a large black dog sunning itself in the park across the street. His face split into a bright grin as he walked up to the extremely familiar mutt that was obliviously licking himself in a potentially embarrassing fashion. You know, I think it's as clean as it's going to get, Harry stated, having successfully snuck up on the dog. The grim-looking canine stopped immediately, lifted his head, and slowly turned towards the vaguely recognizable voice with an expression as close to surprise as a dog could possibly have. Creaky! Padfoot! Harry yelped, throwing an arm up to cover his eyes. Put that lipstick away!